Yeah, well.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the FiresideKE, the home of politics, policy, and polity. This is yet another interesting show that we're going to have in the next 90 minutes. And joining me today to discuss three of the most important issues in the public domain today are my friend, political risk analyst, Dismas Mokua, Wakili Gachui Kariuki, and Wakili Moses Chelanga. You've met these four, and I think today we are going to have a very interesting conversation given the topics that we have. First, we want to look at the president's tour of Nyanza region. A number of critics have talked about the goodies that he took to this region: Migori, Homa Bay, Kisumu, and Siaya. Of course, we saw the coming back of homecomings. We thought we were done with homecomings. It seems like we are not done yet. So we saw him grace the homecoming parties of the cabinet secretaries from Nyanza, that is Honorable Mbadi, Honorable Pio Wandai, and who was the third one? Okay, the two homecoming parties in Nyanza. The second thing we want to look at is Katiba at 14. The Constitution of Kenya is now 14 years after it was promulgated in 2010. And lastly, and most importantly, a topic that Dismas Mokua is passionate about, public accountability, the issue of tumetenga, tumeweka, tumejipanga. What do we have? And as a country, do we have leaders who are accountable to the promises that they make, who are accountable to the resources that we've trusted them to allocate and distribute? Thank you for joining us. For the next 90 minutes, those are the three things you're going to discuss. And as I've told you, I'm with my colleagues here, my friends, people I've interacted with on this show, and it's going to be exciting. Let me start with the Nyanza tour. Wakili, they say, the hyenas.
The two Wakili. Yeah, so.
there's Wakili Senior and Wakili Junior. Yeah, Junior. Wakili Junior. They're talking about the hyena, herding the goats together. And I think these are people who are looking at, these tours from a very critical point of view. But the reality of the matter is that there is a lot of goodies that went to Nyanza. If I start with my home county of Migori, I think the president launched a number of things, commissioned a number of things. Look at what happened in Migori. There was a water project that was launched in Kuria East. He inspected, an irrigation project along the Kuja River, which is a big deal because it is likely to provide water to many homesteads within the Rongo, Awendo, and entire, Migori County. He also launched, a road that has been in very bad state for a long time, a road that I've used as a native of Migori. The Gege Mapera Road, and there are a number of roads in Migori. There are also a number of things that the leadership of Migori presented as petitions. Key among them was the unfinished projects that were started courtesy of the handshake government. Then he went to Kisumu, commissioned the Lake Basin Development Authority rice mill in Kibos. Again, such a big project, with a plant that is likely to process 4,000 tons per hour of rice that is cultivated along that Kano Plain region of Chiga, East Kano, and West Kano. And of course, what we are looking at is a plant that is touted to be having the capacity to support at least 10,000 households, which is a big thing. A number of other things were launched in Kisumu. So there was the laying of the foundation of the construction of affordable housing in Lumumba Estate. There was the commissioning of the 800 million Lake Victoria Maritime Rescue Coordination Center. He also commissioned something that was started during President Uhuru Kenyatta's government, that is the 1.1 billion Nyabondo Trauma Center, and talked about, committing to build, a fresh produce market for the people of Kisumu. Again, another promise that was made. In Siaya, there wasn't a lot in Siaya, but also big. There's a solar grid that was commissioned in Bondo, Raila Odinga's constituency. There is 450,000 that was set up when we come to Homa Bay, that was set up in Homa Bay town to help the people of Homa Bay Town access water. He launched the Oyugi's Water Project, which will benefit the residents of Kabondo and Kasipul, Kabondo, Kasipul, and Kasipul. And then he also talked about Homa Bay becoming a city, you know. Now, before I even go to the backstory of this, I mean, looking at all these goodies, and you know, the entire trip seems to have, you know, prominently favored Homa Bay County for reasons that a number of people keep saying is, you know, the emergence of the governor of Homa Bay County as a possible running mate, and the political undertones around this. A number of people are comparing the goodies that went to the Luo Nyanza region and the goodies that went to other regions. And there's this belief that the people who are not shareholders in this government seem to be reaping a lot more. Is this about development? Is this about galvanizing, you know, our war chest as we think of 2027? Let me start with you, Wakili.
Are you complaining?
Which Wakili now?
Wakili Senior.
Are you complaining as a resident of Migori?
I am very happy.
I mean, the question that I would ask is that were these projects, what would they be launched anyway, even before the dalliance of Raila Odinga or the polity of that region with the new formation, the so-called broad-based government? Would these projects be there? Had there been no broad-based government, which inclusive of the 2 cabinet secretaries from the place? That brings the question that must people be in government so that projects be launched in the respective places? That is the question that we have, that's been there in this country for a long time, that kama huko kwa serikali, ndio maendeleo inakuja kwenu. So you see now, that is, we're perpetuating that kind of politics that started in the 60s of developing the places where they support the government or the regime in place, which sort of, in the US, they call it pork barrel policies, whereby you develop with a strategic agenda that you want to get votes from these guys. What about people of Wajir? What about people of Tana River? What about people of far end West Pokot or in Loima, in Turkana County? So that is the question, is that. So, but at the end of the day is that it boils down to that we will be perpetuating this narrative that for us to have development in our places, we must support the government of the day.
Actually, in my view, I think that is a fallacy when Wakili Sina says that you must be in government.
I think what Wakili is saying is that is the perception, and that's what we need to ask ourselves.
Yes.
That were the people of Nyanza going to get these things anyway without this arrangement of a broad-based government?
Yes.
Now that is the bone I have to pick within that is perpetuating a fallacy. Because in the 2010 Kenyan Constitution, you got a minority and a majority. So it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Mura, Waweru, everybody is in government. And I think that fallacy that we must be in government is a special tool used by politicians to mislead and suspecting Mura. That if you want Mandela to come to your place, then I must be in government. We all know for a fact that the people who got the yam and the knife are members of the National Assembly. So the Treasury would come up with
that
plans.
is the ideal position.
Yeah, and we are discussing what we've elected these people to run with the ideal situation.
Yes.
So if a constituency doesn't get Mandeleo, you have nobody to blame apart from your elected leader. While we know that the president has got a leeway, but I think our point of entry should be the members of the National Assembly. Because majority of the members of the National Assembly who do not deliver, they'll always blame people, say that we are not in government, that is the reason why we are lagging behind, while in fact they're squandering resources. But in my view, when you look at the Nyanza trip, even forget about the Mandeleo programs that Professor has done a very elaborate presentation. That's actually is done an elaborate presentation. You'd even think that he works at State House or he's in charge of the president's diary. It's been very elaborate, yeah. You know, the president is a symbol of national unity.
As it should be.
And in the past, because of the high octane politics in parts of Nyanza, he wouldn't visit these parts with a lot of ease. Because I saw, as soon as he got up to the top of the car, there were mobs. I understand even his security guys had a bit of challenges. So one may want to look at it from that perspective, that is a symbol of the national unity. Then number two, that trip demonstrates the kind of power or political power that Mr. Raila Odinga possesses. Because without Mr. Raila Odinga saying anything, everybody in Nyanza is rolling out the red carpet for the president. The other MPs initially who had said they were going to work with the president, like Karoli Omondi and the rest, they really went to State House, they were struggling, but they were not able to create this environment for President Ruto to go and visit.
They had a disciplinary case.
Yeah, and probably are representing them.
No.
So that one captures this thing you call the Raila phobia or the Raila power that is held, for lack of a better word, is held a community hostage. That at the flick of his fingers, whatever he does is considered to be the absolute position, and nobody can dare challenge it. Not scholars like Professor Owilla, not people. If you go to Game has got the highest concentration of PhDs. But whatever Mr. Raila Odinga says is always true, is always accurate. Nobody can challenge it. And maybe at some stage we should ask ourselves, is this kind of political power really for the society? That you have one individual with almost absolute powers. And then, of course, the contradiction is that these people gave the president a red carpet reception. Maybe 99 out of 100 did not vote for him. And the professors elaborated, all the Mandela's going in. So parts of Kenya are saying, wait a minute, we thought, in fact, you were the main shareholders.
But
what is happening with that?
Market.
Yeah.
Dismas, I think that gives us a very interesting point of departure. That is it a question of your political affiliation that brings that Maendeleo?
That is my
Or,
first question.
Yes, or the presidency. The moment a president is elected, a determination is made by the IEBC and the Supreme Court. We're not making that ruling for a section of Kenya.
Exactly.
We're making for the entire country. And I think the risk we have here is not whether Raila Odinga controls people or not. The risk we have here is if there is a narrative that they're banding around, they want to unite the country, they want to stabilize the country. The question is, who created that instability? Who says Kenyans are not united? And do you unite Kenyans by excluding another section of Kenyans, by distributing resources inequitably? Because you're looking at the people of Nyanza as the next frontier.
I would want to be in opposition and very comfortable. That Owilla, you're my president, even if I didn't vote for you.
For you,
Exactly.
yes.
And you come and fix my water
Yes.
in my village.
And I get water, and I
Exactly.
get water whether I am in any political coalition with you or not.
And before
point
Gachui
you're going
comes
to
in, before you come in, there's this thing you're talking about uniting a nation. And there's a writer in Nigeria who says, do the citizens actually need to be united? All you need to do is to respect the Kenyan constitution, respect your neighbor, and do everything according to the law. What is this thing about unity? Is it actually a fallacy, or it's the case that people really need to be united? And then if you are united, assuming you're not united, and then powerful politicians, their selfish interests are aligned, who is now the beneficiary? Is it Mora, is it Halima, or is it still the same politicians? Gachui.
Yes, I was going to say that with the inception of the new constitution, those were the fundamental issues that were supposed to be cured, by this new constitution. Number one, everyone is entitled to service. Everyone is entitled to government protection, government resources, and whatnot. But we still continue seeing the same problem, and this is reinforcement of fear in politics. That if you're not going to vote for me, you stand the likelihood of missing out on opportunities, on the government serving you, on resources and infrastructure being brought to your particular locality. And perhaps it has also been used since 2013 and at the detriment of people in Nyanza, the larger Nyanza region. But at the same time, I'd say that from my own personal experience and what I've witnessed, devolution has worked very well for the people of Nyanza generally.
Really?
Yes, that is what I've seen, and that is what I've heard from other people who come from this region.
I come
from
Not
Central.
Kenya
I
generally.
come from Nyanza.
Yeah.
If Mura listens to that
I
conversation,
stand to be corrected.
she'll be in a state of
I stand
shock.
to be corrected.
It does.
on
Discuss
that.
I can tell you, maybe it's
Yeah.
part of Nyanza, but it has
Part.
worked. Yes.
It has generally worked.
I have traversed Nyanza for a very long period of time, all the way
Yeah.
from Western, because I'm the other end of Nyanza, the the southmost part of Kenya, and you can actually see the fruits of devolution. Yes, you can. Whether it is because of Raila herding his people together, and sometimes looking for other hyenas to herd goats together, and they shepherd these goats to some greener pasture or not, is another question.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Let me continue. Let me
Maybe we just need to define when you talk about the fruits of devolution. What are these fruits? So that because my experience when I see Mura, every time you say devolution is working for Mura and in Nyambura, they roll their eyes. All they see are rich elected leaders.
Okay.
That today they can't afford a cup of tea, but tomorrow, as soon as they're sworn into office, they can buy the entire establishment. If those are the fruits of devolution that Mura is supposed to dance with, then I think it's been amazing. And also, when you look at the Auditor General's report, when they offer opinions about these counties, your jaws will drop to the ground. You'll even begin to wonder whether we've got accountability institutions in Kenya.
But we'll come to that. I know what Wakili is saying that is
trickling down of resources, and at the county level, Kenyans are able to determine, maybe perhaps through public participation, through county integrated development plans, they're able to determine how monies will be spent. If that actually happens or not is another story altogether. Okay, but ultimately, everyone deserves development, and perhaps over the years, the national government, through state corporations and other departments, has been able to scout and map out areas of development, whether it's Nyanza or other regions in this country. One way or the other, projects were going to come in, projects are going to be commissioned. Perhaps the timing is what is political, and as far as Ruto creating a war chest for 2027 is concerned, that is quite spot on, and I think that's an area we need to continue looking at. It's going to be an interesting area. I don't know if it's going to be able to consolidate the rest of the country, it's an interesting conversation against the backdrop of what has been happening in the past 3 months or so.
You mentioned something about unity. Unity. I need to address the issue of unity because you see, I mean, vis-a-vis stability. Okay, unity, you don't need to be united in thought and in mind. But you may be united on common ideals. For example, we need a stable country. Yeah. We need everyone to go about with their business. We need justice, we need fairness. That one we can agree that we need unity. But you don't need unity on ideology, on who can vote for together as the community of Kenya. You see, they say democracy is a dictatorship of the majority. Because so now what happens to the minority who cannot agree with you? Should they be expelled and go elsewhere? No, they are part of this community. So that's why we have something called counter-majoritarian rule to protect now those who are minority or those who are not part of the bigger hyenas, the big boys. So we have to protect them, the marginalized, the small, the minority. That's why even the Constitution provides about the minority leadership and all that. Yeah. So, but the most important thing is that at least the president, the thing that came out there is that you see the tension or the storm has lulled. Yeah. So remember the president going there was being pelted on stones when he was in Kondele. His security was threatened, but he was equally threatened in happiness.
The most interesting thing.
So a joyful threat.
But before Willa comes in, there's an issue that Wakili Jr. has decided to dodge, which is how do you establish that devolution has been a success? Is it by seeing that like for instance, the way they're supposed to do their budgets? Under successful circumstances, 20% goes to recurrent, 80% goes to development expenditure. The converse is the case. Yeah. Even matters of employment, because there's a provision that you shouldn't, I think, have more than 70% of the employees being members of the local community. The converse is the case, if at all. If you go to majority of those hospitals, they may have installed top-of-the-range infrastructure, MRA or X-ray. Yeah. But can Mura walk into the facility run by the county governments and get services? I'd say, for instance, healthcare workers happy with the administration. If you go to counties, will you ever encounter, say, with garbage, with the slaughterhouses? I mean, are people generally happy, apart from seeing MCAs and their governors in top-of-the-range vehicles?
I think it starts work in progress, if you ask me. Yeah. Because it is
healthcare cannot be work in progress.
What cannot be work in progress?
When you have a patient and then you tell them it's work in progress.
There is the biggest problem with counties, in my experience, is mostly corruption and wastage. Yes. But you can't say that it has achieved nothing. But
No, I haven't
there's-
said it has achieved nothing.
there is much that can
How
be
do
done.
you quantify
I think
success?
We'll come
this-
to that when
success
we're
of
discussing
devolution.
Katiba and 10. Maybe we can discuss that.
Yeah,
Maybe
but
yeah,
we
yeah.
deliberate further.
But at least the point Dismas is raising is very critical.
Very important, yes.
How do you determine that it has been
The
a success?
success. Yeah.
But I think the first determination is that even that healthcare, when it is not working, you have someone closer to you that you can interrogate.
Yes.
Correct.
You have the county government there, and it is spelled out that health is devolved, and there are people you can ask questions because there is clarity on the resources that are drawn down to the county level, and there are people you can ask questions. And even there are critics who say that even corruption has been devolved, and even the benefits of corruption now is fairly distributed. It's not
Countrywide.
just it's not
There's
just a few
equity
people
and
who are
equality.
corrupt. But that does not mean
That we be
that
corrupt.
we be corrupt. It simply means that maybe there's a way in which we've not been very vigilant about corruption at the county level, like we are at the national level.
But I think you make a point anyways, that's very controversial. There's a Nigerian scholar who says that Nigerians, there are a section of the economy of Nigeria that is controlled or that is that depends on corruption. That's the true. The same is true about
And
Kenya.
it is thriving.
Yes, thriving because of corruption. And when you kill this corruption, you may destroy some people.
The economy is
So
shaking.
yeah, so end up pole. In fact,
Yeah, those are-
in fact, Auditor General, actually, last Auditor General was telling guys, if you steal, please invest at home. So anyway, it's a discussion for another day. You know that we encourage corruption. But now another thing that I wanted us to
your
discuss.
conversation appears that you are happy with corruption.
No, we are not happy with
I'm not- I'm
corruption.
just
In
saying-
fact, the point you're making
We're
is
talking
that
about
we need to be
devolution.
vigilant even at the county level, the way we are at the national level.
So now, the thing is that another thing that we need, what I realized or what I observed in the trip, is that this fallacy of saying that we need to have professionals in cabinet. I did not see the excitement that Owala's appointment got the way Honorable Badi and Honorable Andais. But these are political bigwigs who are appointed in government. So do we still need to insist that we need to have professionals, Owilla and his PhD and his books to be in cabinet, or we need someone who has a power base?
Political
Because it looks like power it resides in that cabinet room.
Yeah.
So when you're in the cabinet and you're holding a political office, people feel they're included, however fallacious it is that they're in government. Apart
But is
from
it- was
yeah.
it
So I mean that thing of professionals and politicians in cabinet.
And I think we can come back to that when we're looking at Katiba at 14. Has it worked for us? Because what was envisaged was to relieve politicians
Yes.
of the responsibility of representing their people and going to the counties and not delivering.
The only qualification to be a cabinet secretary is not to be a member of parliament.
And also, you hit the nail on the head because the only qualification, to frame it from the other side, to be a cabinet secretary in Kenya is to demonstrate that in fact you are Kenyan.
Yes.
Either by having a Kenyan passport or by having a birth certificate or an ID.
National ID.
There is no academic nor professional qualification associated with being a cabinet secretary.
Nothing.
So I think the framers of the constitution said, if you've got political capital, and then you've got capacity and competence, actually not even capacity and competence, you've got political capital, then you can make your way to the cabinet. That is the reason why we are supposed to have very solid and agile principal secretaries to run the show.
But coming back to the Nyanza tour, I think we've talked about the tour, but the backstory to it,
Yes.
especially looked at against the backdrop of the drive to unity. A number of things, three key things that have popped up is those stalled projects, and the fact that even in 2023 October, the president was in Homa Bay County, talked about the housing project. He went back. There was nothing about the housing project. He was totally talking about new things. Number two that came out was, there was this drive by ODM legislators and the overzealous UDA legislators who are talking about uniting Kenyans. And you could see there were some sentiments. No one should be left behind. But there were sentiments that were basically exclusionary, that were telling you that, yes, this is the direction of bringing people on board. But you could tell that at the expense of certain people. One member of parliament was actually categorical, that anyone who attacks Baba will have to face me. But then you look at the history and you're thinking, so who is this who is attacking Baba? And he went over and over talking about Nyanza has just been given 4 cabinet slots and they are over the moon celebrating. Us, we were given 7 and we were sabotaging the government. And there are undertones, that, when you sit down and you ask yourself, what is this? And there are critics who've talked about this is basically a journey for the current regime and specifically UDA and the Kenya Kwanza part of UDA to compensate for the numbers that they're losing in Mount Kenya region by wooing the ODM strongholds. So you have Nyanza, you have parts of Western, and then you have the coastal region. Now that is a conversation that will keep going on, and I think enough people are talking about there's stability that ODM has brought, but no one is talking about now what was the instability. But from the tour, I don't know what you guys saw, but I saw elements of what someone would consider that destabilizing factor, and no one seems to be talking about it.
Just to buttress that point, the Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah spoke in Swahili and said, wale wenye walikuwa wamesema watawekea baba mtego, hiyo mtego labda itawashika. And I think that answers your question without even struggling to join the dots.
Yes.
Because it's well known who indicated that he had set up, I don't know whether they're called mouse traps.
Yes.
To
Raila.
On site of Mr. Raila Odinga.
When during the launch of his candidature, Olusegun Obasanjo said that he came to Kenya in 1995. And when he went back to Nigeria, he was arrested that he was going to plan a coup in Kenya. And the president, quick anecdotal, said that even him is not the only one who's been in trouble because of Raila. He supported Raila once and then he found himself in trouble.
In a foreign court.
In an international court. So, okay, that is the image that, of course, they are saying that those are people who are. So imagine, what does it say about Raila? But be that as it may, is that...
No, you haven't answered the question. What does it say about Raila?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know what they were thriving at, but the thing is that without Raila, there is instability, sort of, for the last, when he was in politics. If you don't have Raila on your side of the game, then you have to face some challenges.
So are you venturing to say that Raila is actually an architect of instability?
I don't want to say that it's an architect of instability, but I'll say those are two presidents who said it, that they found themselves in trouble. I've never found myself in trouble by supporting Raila.
Well,
but I'm just
saying
saying
consequential.
But I'm just saying is a figure that you cannot ignore. Globally, you can't.
So the two of them were very generous with the other side that you're silent about.
Yes.
That the interaction with Raila probably created a pathway to presidency.
Yes. Yeah, that was the end of that was the silver lining of it. But at the end of the day, as you say, that there's, of course, there was a lot of friction in this regime, and you're just being generous that Mount Kenya region, they of course have their own. Raila Odinga is a boogeyman all the time during all these elections. So if you bring Raila Odinga into government, where the leadership had agreed that this is our government, and they've even gone ahead to say that you must buy shares, and you bring a stepchild to come and eat your lunch, that becomes a friction. But that is me, I think that it's good to bring everyone on board. And the other thing also that people have not said, I mean, you don't know whether this will be sustainable until the end of
the term.
Until the end of the term. We've seen it before. We've seen it with KANU. We've seen it with NAC, Rainbow. It never lasted. We've seen it with Government of National Unity. We see it with Handshake. That of course.
And who is the common denominator? There you are listing. Who is the common denominator?
In this whole thing, there is a Raila effect, which I would say, in this politics. You can't ignore him. Such that you see, shaking Raila's hand is a ceasefire instrument. in the past 2 decades, the politics of this country. It's a stabilizing effect. So you cannot ignore him. And when Raila blesses you, that is it. And that is a vote that somebody like William Ruto knows very well that he doesn't want to lose this particular constituency. But there are people now who are not happy with that. And they are not losing anything by even Raila.
I think one of the things that perhaps the president would have to address is debunking the whole boogeyman, Raila as a boogeyman thing in the mountain, because obviously that narrative will keep being peddled, and especially now. I talked about reinforcement using fear. And a number of politicians will try to capitalize on that, and especially the ones you may have mentioned on trying to destabilize the government as it is right now. But that said, I'm seeing a lot of goodwill from a number of central Kenyan MPs, talking about you guys need to stop fearing that we are losing. We are not losing. We are well represented within this government. In fact, we have from the office of the president, we have the deputy president. We are well represented in parliament, the executive as well. And we lose nothing. In fact, we just need to embrace others. We need to address our sense of entitlement, because historically, my people have had to deal with a serious sense of entitlement.
The size of a problem.
Yes, and the sooner we admit that we do have that issue, and that sense of entitlement is what brings the fear, and then politicians use that to isolate the mountain. I don't think the president has any ill will against the mountain, but he needs to constantly engage, ensure that this fear is tackled. If I was Raila, this would be the best time. Like I said, ODM has a good chance of
spreading its tentacles.
Exactly, and especially in the mountain, if he vacates office or just steps away a bit and even goes on an offensive, a charm offensive for the party, for himself, for the country in the mountain, in pursuance of unity. Yeah.
But as we bring this conversation to a close, there's one interesting thing that we've also seen, emerge time and again, that this newfound broad-based government came in to stabilize the country, to bring people together, some sense of unity. But we are running away from the fact that it may not be sustainable. If they think that now we are stable, and they don't go back to the genesis of what brought them together, which was a disenfranchised, citizenry. People were not happy. It is not a question of we were disunited. Yeah. Kenyans went to the street simply because we had high hopes of this government that we voted for. It was delivering absolutely nothing. It was raiding our pay slips. The cost of goods was going extremely high. And there's that perception that they coalesce to protect their own interests. And if this coming together does not address the issues, even the unity, the stabilization that the president is talking about will be a mirage, especially if you look at it against the backdrop of what happened with the handshake. The handshake was also to unite Kenyans. But after the election, we became even a lot more divided in terms of the shareholders of the government and the people who are not shareholders. So just briefly, as we wind up this, where do we see this going in terms of the rank and turmoil that brought the political leaders together, the Gen Z's demands, the high cost of living, the fact that there was post-election disillusionment with this government. We were doing so well while we were waiting for this government to be enthroned. They came to power and things became extremely tough.
When you do the root cause analysis, and it's all about economics, they say that the current administration inherited an economy that had been successfully mismanaged by President Kenyatta when you zoom in on the public debt. But
even as you continue, that one they knew. And it's the reason why Kenyans voted for them. Because they unpacked the fact that the previous government had damaged the economy, whether it was real or not. And they were sent to this government to solve that problem.
Yeah, now I don't know why you cut the conversation, because you've not added a point. So the point I was making is the administration, times above number, starting from Brigadier Gachagua when they were being sworn in, he said that he's gone to the coffers and things are haywire. The Honorable Musalia Mudavadi indicated that we need at least 2 years to stabilize the ship. But I think majority of Kenyans are very keen and very happy with instant coffee. So they were hoping that stabilizing the economy is going to be instant coffee, but it doesn't happen that way. Even the Honorable Mbadi right now has indicated that please give us 1 more year before the economy stabilizes. So for me, I think the biggest challenge with the administration is expectations management via communication. So that if things are thick, you must be very open and tell Mura things are thick. It's going to take us 2 years or 3 years, but you give them a very good roadmap on the key success factors, on the path you are going to follow. But I think majority of the people obviously were impatient. And then, of course, there was a misinformation and a disinformation that people wanted to create a turbulence. And as a result, there was a bit of a crisis. But now the biggest challenge for Mbadi is for him now to reassure Kenyans, because he said we give him 1 year, not just to tell us 1 year in an abstract manner. Give us very key indicators that this 1 year, this is what I'm going to do within 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months. All of us will be dancing to the bank. Because if they don't do that, I can predict that in another year's time, Gen Z will be back in the streets.
And I think when they come back to the streets, it won't matter who is part of this broad-based government. It will be a question of the entire political class being drained.
Exactly.
Although on the flip side, the moment Mr. Raila Odinga exported top talent to the cabinet, people in parts of Lunyanza, when there were demonstrations, they said, "Why do you want us to demonstrate?
And
we are
Baba
now
is
in
happy."
government." Baba
But
is
you know,
in
the
government.
thing is, what you're saying is very true, because you see, the issues that Gen Zs are raised are very serious issues, and they cut across everyone, whether you're supporting who or supporting who, cost of living, education, competence in government, service delivery. Those are issues that need to be addressed. You see, by next year, August, people will start campaigning for 2027. So there is no time. These guys need to work, need to deliver. Otherwise, we'll go back to the same place we started from. The only thing that is saving grace is that, which is not saving grace, it is actually not sustainable, is that Kenyans suffer from Stockholm syndrome, meaning that they are in love with the abductors or the captors.
Fall in love with
They
our
fall
captors.
in love with our captors, who is Raila Odinga, who is in charge of a huge constituency, who is a William Ruto in charge of a huge constituency. They can even bring in Kalonzo Musyoka.
With
Then
a
they
small
blackmail
constituency.
everyone, as you say. Then now they cannibalize.
Yes.
So we need to find a way, and I like the energy of the Gen Z, that we should be able to come up and say, now we need change, or we need to have a different conversation on how going forward. Otherwise, we'll be held at ransom forever.
One thing I know that is going to happen for sure, this is very predictable of this regime, is they're going to drop the ball again in the next 6 months or so.
Yes.
Whether it's these new entrants, the broad-based representatives, or whether it's the ones who've been around for a while, they will drop the ball. And one thing is for sure, Gen Zs will be going back to the streets. So if I was the president, if I was Raila Odinga, right now, this is when you start vigilantly running the executive. There's no two ways about it. And when young people come together again, Gen Zs and millennials, it was not just Gen Zs. If Gen Zs and millennials come together, it will be much, much worse than what we've witnessed this past couple of months.
What do you mean by dropping the ball and running the administration vigilantly?
I mean, it's what you're saying, that Mbadi wants 1 year. If things don't change in 1 year, 1 year, we're getting into an election mode. Already they're on a campaign mode sort of operation. So in 1 year, if that is what they want us to give them, if the president and his newfound, associates in the broad-based government are not vigilant, so that they preach on those top-of-the-range vehicles, but also deliver on the promises that they made. Just like you said, in 2023, we had demonstrations. Yes. They were not as bad.
Yes.
But there are people who predicted and said, by the way, these guys are making sense. It's only that the guys on the streets are actually guys who are still bitter that they lost the election. Yes. But there are people who say it is okay if the guys who lost the election demonstrate. It will be bad if the guys who voted for this government, who won with this government, come to the streets because they are tired. They came this year. It was bad. Now, the combination of the guys who lost the election came to the streets, they were stopped. The broad-based government happened. And the guys who believed in this government, 1 year down the lane, if those two realize that there's nothing good in this broad-based government, I think it will be worse. And I totally agree with you. But Dismas, I think you can take us to the next conversation on accountability. How then do we hold this government accountable? I mean, you look at the things that the handshake government did, a number of them stalled, simply because we have regimes that believe that the business of the government is the business of political parties and not the business of the people. So how do we hold them accountable? There's a young man running around, telling us what was launched, how much has been spent, and what is in it for Kenyans. And for most of these instances, you realize that nothing much has happened, including the Kanyagwal fisheries and aquaculture. I mean, which is still... And the president was down in Kisumu, and no one touched on that conversation. At least not in the public domain, which raises so many issues about, public accountability, fidelity to the truth by politicians. And I don't think our politicians are big in that area.
Now, when you talk about public accountability, you've raised many questions, but I'll venture and give it some meat. And accountability, essentially what it does is, the nexus between public accountability is that it creates trust between the government and the citizenry. So when you have elected officials or an administration which is accountable, there is very high levels of trust. But the conversation right now is that the current administration has got challenges with trust. That in fact there's a trust deficit. That is what a number of scholars are talking about. And now this is what has occasioned public resentment. That when a government official says that the government has done X, people will not believe it. I can actually venture and say that if a Kenya Kwanza administration official goes outside and says the sky is blue, people will actually go outside to establish whether or not the sky is blue because of that trust deficit. And we know that accountability, public accountability, is the Berlin Wall between democracies and dictatorships. So the question is, can Kenyans actually say that our elected officials are accountable? Gachui, do you believe that Mura or Nyambura believes that the administration is accountable, the National Assembly, Senate, Judiciary, all public servants are accountable to Mura?
I don't think the average citizen in this country believes that state agencies or state officers, state representatives are accountable to them at the very least. And what we have seen, rarely will you find a public officer in this country, willingly come out with, say, audit reports or plans, strategic plans of this is what we're going to be doing, this is what we've spent, this is the deficit, this is what we have in the coffers from the last financial year, this is what we're planning to do. Very few public officers in this country are willing to do that. So what has happened is, for the most part, and thank God for it, activists and mostly civil society organizations have taken it upon themselves to constantly, vigilantly watch everything that is being done by, government and public officers, and where they falter, where they seem to, be jittery about communication and transparency, more often than not, people will go to court. And then public officers are compelled to go public with information, go public with data, go public with reports and whatnot. Ultimately, because of that very reason, and everything we have seen again since the Gen Z fiasco, is members of public do not trust what is coming out of this government. So if, again, like the example you've given, the government says, the sky is blue, Kenyans will have to go out and confirm for themselves, is it actually blue, or are they wanato bebo? Stories are jaba. Mm-hmm. So everyone is trying to make sure that serikali tupati stories are jaba. And for that very reason, I think for the most part, Kenyans don't believe that this government can hold itself to account or is accountable to the public. There's zero public trust.
Before you go to Musa, let's go to the professor of communications. Would you say misinformation, disinformation, and commercial activism is actually a threat to public accountability? Because we've got a number of activists who actually lie about stuff. When the government has done a project, but because they've got a capacity in social media, they come up with the content suggesting that something has not been done, while in fact it has been implemented.
I mean, to some extent, you can actually blame misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And I say to some extent, simply because, you create a vacuum for those three strands of information disorder when you don't give information. So it comes back to the establishment. When you don't proactively provide that information that is accurate, correct, and verifiable, then people will come in and fill in that vacuum. And when they come in and fill in that vacuum, sometimes they come in with no ill intention, but without the facts. That leads you to misinformation. Now, sometimes they come in to fill the gap with ill intention, where they know the truth, but they decide that we are just going to disinform people. Deliberate attempts to make people believe in something that is not factual. And the worst of them all is malinformation, where they pick the truth from quarters that are not public because they know that truth, and then manipulate that truth with deepfakes. And that is what takes us back to what is the responsibility of the establishment. It is their responsibility to communicate. If there's a fisheries aquaculture in Kisumu that was launched, and there's a gap in the implementation. It is for the establishment to help the public understand. Now, these are the issues that have emerged. This is the reason why this project has stalled. This is what the government is doing to continue with this stall. Without that kind of proactive communication, then you're opening it up for every other ragtag and bobtail to tell Kenyans that this is what the government is doing that is not in your interest, even when they are riding on falsehood.
But if you can offer a summary and say somebody in the administration says, could you advise me on how to make sure that public accountability is not undermined by, you've said, disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, and commercial activism. Yeah. How do you immunize public accountability from those 4 pillars?
Provide access to information. Just give access to the right information. It is not always that the government will do everything 100% the way they planned, but it is incumbent upon the government to let the public know that you're not doing this because of any ill intention, but there are cogent reasons why we are not doing this. Once that information is there is no activist who will come in and start acting on things on behalf of people, because the government shall have given people enough information for people to act for themselves. And I think that's where we have a very big gap.
Now, I know you guys are communication experts.
Gurus.
Yes. I mean, there's all this too much heavy weather you've made over communication. People like government is under communicating, activists are over communicating. I mean, in government projects are visible projects mostly. If a road has not been done, do you need information? It's Ronald Reagan who said, if you are explaining, then you're losing it.
No, but you see, what if there's a court order?
Exactly.
There are certain things
but
that...
you can't have court orders every day. At least... no. At least you can explain, maybe at least 50 plus 1. Anyway, that was the point I was saying. So communication sometimes also, So anyway, what I was saying is that accountability, yes, is one of our national values under Article 10. The reason why there are checks or there is provisions for accountability, both under the law, both by elected leaders and by senators direct, is that government, especially the executive, should never be trusted in the first place. You start from there. Don't trust
those
government.
Are the premises.
Premises. You start by not trusting a government.
That's why you have Sirikali.
Yeah. So don't trust the government. So let them just do their work, and if they can't do it, then there are enough mechanisms. The reason why you're talking about citizenship is that because we have, the Article 1 of the Constitution says the sovereign belongs to the people. It can be exercised directly or indirectly through elected leaders. Why is there now this argument of public accountability? Because at the national level, we have given Parliament duty to oversight government. At the county level, we have given county assembly. Are those guys doing their work? From where I sit, they are not. If Parliament was doing its work properly, they would have listened, even for example, during the public participation, anyone with conscience would have heard that there is a problem with our finance bill. But the Parliament was captured. In the county assemblies, you find there's dalliance between the governors and the MCAs looking for allowances. So now it's incumbent upon citizens to take upon themselves to say, okay, now we're going to do this through organization in the town halls, in the barazas, or in any other fora, or through civil society. So I think it is a good thing that we need to hold the government to account, but also there is right to information. Sometimes governments also have a tendency of not giving access to information. For example, there is the concession that is happening in the airport now. People are asking, okay, now is the airport being sold or is the airport being taken by Indians? But that is something that, using that, it's simple information. No one is selling the airport. It's a concession. It's a management agreement, privately invest. It's called PPIP. Yes, so people have a right to make whole manner of guesses and say that the airport has been sold to Indians.
Let me just stop you there for a bit, because you've raised 2 fundamental questions. So you've, the 2 of you refer to yourselves as learned friends. So you're actually admitting that Kenya as a nation, we are letting our elected leaders go away with murder.
Yes. We actually, the good thing with us also is that our constitution has also given us provisions as citizens to be able to also hold account those elected leaders
How?
by recalling them.
Have we ever recalled
No
an
one has
elected
started.
leader?
Actually, there's a provision. The MPs who passed the Election Act, it's very difficult to recall an MCA. It's easier to impeach a president.
So the provision is
Okay,
is largely voodoo.
It's unconstitutional to extent that it makes it difficult to be able to recall an MP or to recall an MCA.
So in other words, you said like
But
one
actually
commissioner said
yes.
that people are vomiting on shoes.
On our shoes, yes.
So you're just admitting as a senior member of the bar in Kenya
Not quite senior, but heading there.
that we are just allowing our elected leaders to vomit on our shoes and we clap for them.
Exactly. That's exactly what's
Unfortunately.
happening.
What is the remedy? What is the cure?
Cure is that you see there is a organization called Katiba Institute which has gone to court to declare those provisions unconstitutional, because you cannot ask people that you have to go and get a court order to say that an elected member of parliament has committed an offense or has breached the law or has violation of Chapter 6. When governors, you don't need to get a court order. You just need people to do a motion. And it's not even a legal, it's not a judicial process. So, this is now clawing back the gains that we were saying. We need to recall. We just need that we can even reduce the number of signatures that you need. Maybe you get 50% of the registered voters.
And I think, the point you're making is very critical, because I think Katiba Institute is doing a lot.
It's doing a lot.
Not just in terms of public litigation, but also in advocating for two critical things that I've followed through, and I think they're doing an amazing job. Access to information. They're very big on access to information and legislation that would, not even fast track, avail all the information to the public. And then number two, they're also big on, the constitutional term limit and how you can exercise that term limit.
Yes.
So much so that an outgoing president does not have the power and the clout that presidents still do have in almost all African countries. Even though constitutionally they are limited, they know they're going.
Yes.
But that power gives them a machinery to ensure that they leave their footprints. But having said that, two things that I've also noted is that, one, citizenship is not a thing for most Kenyans. People don't engage. There are a number of things that happen in the county assemblies, and even guys at the local level are not interested. They don't know the bills, public participation, at the very local level. National level, we know. I mean, people assume that they are too busy to even participate in legislation that will affect their lives. So that is the one aspect that I can blame the citizens, But there's the second bit to it of a regime that thinks that all citizens are naive and therefore they don't provide that information. Either they hold that information, or because of laxity or corruption in these big projects, they just plunder and move on, But right now, citizens are woke. There are people who are walking around telling us this was launched. We are delaunching it, but we are asking for these resources. So those two areas for me are very critical. How do we get these citizens to be a lot more conscious, to start interrogating what is happening, so that the governor doesn't have to, buy all the MCAs?
But before Gachui comes in, Musa has raised a fundamental issue that if you've got all this legislation, you can access all the information in the world if you want. But so what happens after you have the information? How does it add value? Right now, if you go through the Auditor General's reports, you can see that there is corruption. Somebody said at an industrial level. That people are just stealing and stealing and stealing. And unfortunately, in Kenya, when you steal, you are celebrated. So we have got a lot of information. The National Assembly, the Parliamentary Accounts Committee, the Public Investments Committee, they've got a lot of information. Does this mean that we have too much information and we don't know what to do with this information?
For a very long time, I think governments that have come in before the government that is currently there have assumed that Kenyans are not only perhaps politically illiterate or in terms of governance, illiterate or ignorant, but also very docile. The docile bit was correct. The illiterate or the ignorant, maybe not quite. So you find that we have a population of about 70 to 80% people who are literate. Kenya is a very politically, how do I put this? Kenyans are very political. We're a very political people.
Politically charged.
Yes, we're politically charged. Naturally, we take on politics very seriously. But perhaps what we didn't take on was the nitty-gritties of what it means to be managed politically, which is what is now governance. And I suppose in the past couple of years and with the inception of the new constitution, we have seen more and more Kenyans take on roles, on responsibilities in terms of coming to the fore, creating awareness as regards what's going on, what's happening, what projects are there, what monies have been set aside, what is the government doing, what is the Auditor General doing. We're seeing more Kenyans challenge decisions that are being made by public officers, and especially where public participation has not been involved, or where public officers have gone overboard beyond their mandate. Mostly, obviously, through court orders challenging these directives at what is it called? The Constitutional and Human Rights Court?
Division.
Yeah, of the High Court. And we've done pretty well. We have done pretty well. We've done very well for ourselves to that end. But I think there's still so much to be done, because when you talk about, let me finish, when you talk about accountability, citizens, wokeness, there's one thing we never really talk about. We celebrate that we have a good constitution. We talk about wonderful and strengthening of institutions, but we never talk about responsibility, citizen responsibility. And that is where accountability and wokeness comes in. We have responsibilities in terms of paying taxes. We have responsibilities in terms of voting. It's not just a liberty, it's actually a responsibility among other responsibilities. And putting a government in check, engaging the government in decision-making, finding out what is happening and what role do you play there, is also another form of citizen responsibility. And that is what Morara Kebaso has been trying to achieve. I think he's one of the gentlemen who has been going around and uncovering.
Let me stop you for a minute. To use the words of Musa.
Ongoing projects.
Yeah, to use the words of Musa, you've done justice to the theory. Now let's go to the practicals. A governor by the name, former governor by the name Lenkolul. He was accused of a number of things.
Yes.
But now people who have reviewed the ruling, they're saying that it was a slap on the wrist. There are conflict of interest, I think $1 million bob, and then he was told to refund, 83. So the people are saying, wait a minute, you've got a governor who decides to break all rules in the land, and they get a slap on the wrist. Now, from what the junior lawyers indicated, that sounds like an incentive for anybody who is a governor to go and steal.
Just steal more.
Yeah, just steal. More. And then for then conflict of interest, it's going to be $1 million bob. That one of the family members can do an M-Pesa. That you know very well, you're using proxies. Instead of serving Mora, you're using proxies to actually assault Mora. And you know the worst it can get is $1 million bob. So can we therefore say, and I read in the New York Times of a writer called Genua said that, well, the US Constitution is sacred, but it's also dangerous to the nation. So can we also say that, well, the Kenyan Constitution is sacred, it's actually dangerous, because now politics is being run through the judiciary, through the Supreme Court, through all these courts, that everybody knows, anybody who's been in Kenya knows that the Auditor General every single day is pointing fingers. That ESCC, every single day they know people are robbing Mora blind. But the worst they can get is a slap on the wrist.
But I think, Dismas, before the lawyers come in, I don't think it's just an isolated case of this former Samburu governor. And it's not like that slap on the wrist is the issue. I think the issue is corruption, both in the executive, whether at the county or national level. And most importantly, what Nasir Abdullahi keeps saying, corruption in the judiciary, So the fact that this governor
is called jurispesa.
Yes, jurispesa. This corrupt governor who even found himself in court, and so far I think there are only two. There is this former governor for Samburu and my former governor Kothobado. Yeah. I mean, the fact that they found themselves in those corridors basically means that their case probably was one that jurispesa couldn't sort before it got to to litigation. But I mean, this is just a tiny bit of corruption that we know, of corruption that we see in all the other governors that we've seen. You
But
know,
you see
since
the-
the inception of devolution. The critical question would be not the punishment that was meted on him, but why that punishment and why is he the only one?
But I think
No,
the question
I
actually
think
should be,
Professor
why
is
is he the
mixing
only
issues.
one? No, I think I agree with him for the reason
No,
that
no.
why is he the only governor who is in court? Yeah, I think all the governors should be in court, if you ask me. If you read all those audit reports, it is a scene of crime.
So how come it's only one?
So it's only one who's been convicted, and it's actually on a small offense.
Yeah.
It was amount involved was 83 million.
And you call that small?
I mean,
for his county.
compared to the
Oh,
much
okay.
which has been stolen in counties, because it was just a supply of petrol. The question was that it was his own petrol station that was applying to the county. But I think, the punishment was I think equal, because he was told to refund the money or face jail. Okay, he was to go to jail in one count, and another one is supposed to refund the money. I think that is unfair. I read the whole ruling. It is well reasoned. I don't know how the appeal will look like, but that's story for another day. But this thing that you're saying that we have all these resources, we have all this information, avalanche of information. What do we do
Suffocating
with it?
information.
What do we do with
Deluxe.
it? Auditors' reports, we have everything, we have
Big
even
pack.
our own investigation. But also,
ESCC.
if you leave this thing to citizens, which have no budget, it's very expensive.
But you have ESCC, pick and pack.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why if the institutions who are charged to do that work fail, then now we pay taxes and we pay salaries, and then also we go and do it.
So would you
On
say
our own.
ESCC is fit for purpose?
I don't think so, both ASCC and DCI. But I think also it is also politically interfered with. Because all the prosecution, I've been a criminal defense advocate, and I can see through cases which have been influenced, and I can see through cases who people are being protected from being taken to court or being prosecuted. So the problem is that we have a bigger problem, and it all goes around corruption and politics. It's what's called political bad manners that we have. It cannot be litigated. It cannot be legislated. We have a big problem.
Well,
as a
you will
country.
not answer that question.
We just need to start dealing with our bad manners before we talk of legislation.
Musa, you've been very eloquent on these politicians, that it's just only a small percentage that has been taken to court. But before you come to Gachui, have you represented governors who've been accused of corruption and therefore under fat fee note? You may not answer that question.
There are only 2 governors there, so and we have 15,000 lawyers. 30,000.
Now, Gachui, part of the reason why the Nordic countries score very highly on issues of accountability is that Mura, I don't know the names of the females in that part of the world, but Mura in Norway has got access to all information, and anybody who lies to Mura is actually punished. For instance, they've got a ministerial act, which has got 2 important provisions that I must read. That a minister cannot give Parliament false or misleading information. That if you give Parliament false or misleading information, those are grounds for impeachment. And then number 2, a minister cannot fail to disclose information when he appears before a parliamentary committee. Because if you fail to disclose, then the MPs may take a decision based on, half-baked information. Would you say that our members, the cabinet secretaries who go to parliament, are consistent with this act in Norway? Sorry, Denmark.
They were even Kenyans would be shocked.
Do you know between Chapter 6 of our Constitution and I think it's called the Public Ethics and Leadership
Leadership
Act.
and integrity.
Leadership and Integrity Act. Yes. We have more than enough
Very
policies and legislation to ensure that our public officers in this country are properly regulated in terms of avoiding deceptive statements or misleading information, avoiding hiding or concealing information, always being transparent, always ensuring information is out there, like you're talking about access to information. We have a raft.
So then what is the problem in Kenya?
Political interference, political bad manners.
Because you see, those
What I was
acts
saying.
you're saying,
Ultimately.
we have laws like those in Kenya. Like if you read at
Maybe
Chapter
even
6,
more laws.
if you read Article 10, if you even read the Parliamentary and Privileges Act, if you lie under oath in Parliament, It is you're
That's
committing an
perjury.
offense. It's a perjury. So we are actually over legislated, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all we have a problem with implementation.
So is it that there are no consequences
Maybe
for
because
lying?
maybe we are used to lies.
And we've just bastardized the system and the consequences.
Simple.
So are you suggesting that next time we have a referendum, we should delete chapter 6 and that contained from the Kenyan constitution?
No, it's good to be there. Let us struggle. It is like saying because we are sinners, we will now to remove the 10 commandments.
but you know, today I'm the Article 1 representative in this forum, speaking for Mura. So now the two of you as lawyers, you're really confusing Mura. You're saying that we've got a very solid legal framework to punish cabinet secretaries who lie, to punish elected leaders who lie, but they lie and they get away with murder, and all Mura can do is mourn away.
I think Kenyans have reached a stage of what we call fatalism. Fatalism is saying that you've left everything to fate, which is a very sad state of affairs because you see, you are just given up because they say, okay, sour, you're powerful, so there's nothing I can do. But you see, with this Gen Z revolution, I think there is hope at the end of the tunnel, in that you see people can organize themselves, even can crowdfund to be able to pursue a cause, and maybe and at the ballot.
You know, Musa, you're the one who introduced the polity. You said that Fireside is about politics, policy, and policy.
Polity.
So now you successfully described the problem.
Yes.
Give a solution.
A solution.
You know, Kenya has invested in education. They have a valid and legitimate expectation that we must offer a solution.
No, we need to continue being active citizens. Don't give up.
Yeah.
Don't give up. And then the thing also is that you see some of us who maybe you have information, let's continue investing in civic education.
Correct.
Let's continue educating people. Let these people not have peace. Those who are running our country down, those who are lying, those who are sabotaging, those who are, destabilizing the country, and all those. This country is for all of us.
You know,
We need
in
to
some
protect
countries
it.
like Japan,
Yes.
if you lie to the people, that is a ticket for suicide.
Yes.
Politicians actually commit suicide because they have lied to Moran. So does it mean that for us Kenyans, we celebrate people that we know that they are lying, they are breaking all the rules, and we say, this is
I've
it.
actually seen a shift since the Gen Z started harassing, but they wasalimia. Let me go with that word. Since they started kusalimia viongozi in this country, I've seen a certain shift in how leaders, first of all, address members of the public. I've seen a slight shift in terms of transparency. A lot of them have become a bit more agreeable to being transparent in terms of information and whatnot. And that's
Can you give examples?
that
Examples live that we can touch.
I'll give you one after. In my home county, Elgeyo Marakwet, there is something called Project Implementation Committee by the community, members of the community. When we are doing a road, for example, so there are members of the community who continue monitoring the progress of the road. And they are roped into that project. They get information who is the contractor, what is the contract, period. It has to be what standard. So they are all, and they are residents. Yeah. So that is an initiative of the county government, but it's of course with the push from the citizenship. And it works because they will come and harass those fundis, they will harass the contractor, and they tell this project must end by this particular time. Unless maybe there are challenges, maybe the governor comes and says, okay, I have challenges with money, therefore, let's ask for an extension to be able. So I think that kind of active citizenship to be able to be part and parcel of projects should be able to be encouraged all over the country, so that at least the citizenship, because those are the consumers of those particular services or goods that are being provided for.
there was a bill that Ishungwa withdrew, I think, a week or 2 weeks ago, for the simple reason that is insufficient public participation. And this is coming from a legislator who 2 months ago or 3 months ago anything to do with, this is what the citizens want. So that shift has, we are actually seeing that particular shift. And I think ultimately it's just consistent citizen activity, or being very active in terms of governance and vigilantly viewing everything and compelling our leaders to come out and talk to us about what they're doing and even confronting them. They're our leaders. They're there because we're the ones who put them there. They answer to us.
And I think, I mean,
Simple.
just to add on that, I think there's progress that you're making since the Gen Z revolution, because even the president, coming down to, to town hall
Concede.
meetings, to interact with the Gen Zs on Twitter X spaces, in itself tells you that the citizen is getting more and more spaces for interrogating how accountable leaders are. The question is, to what extent are we going to make good use of those spaces? Because as you say, I mean, a legal framework exists, including a very robust policy and regulatory framework. But the bad manners that we have is so bad that Chapter 6 is clearly spelled. But because it is leadership and integrity and it has an ethics component, what is stated to be incriminating anyone who is accused of falling short of Chapter 6 cannot be affected because of our bad manners. Because rather than you step down because of leadership and integrity issues, you're saying, but have not been charged in a court of law. If you had good manners, we'd just say, because all these things are surrounding the person that I am, my integrity has been brought to question. And the best thing is to step aside and leave public office. And I think Kenyans are not yet in that space. And it is for us to push conversations to ensure that whether you are convicted or not, the fact that you're even in that litigation process compromises your ability to be a public or a state officer. So let me just say this.
We should make a resignation of public officers a best practice.
Yes.
I mean, so long as these allegations
And
that are...
there's a doubt.
Yes, there's a doubt in your suitability to hold office. It basically means that you need to give room to another person who is doubtless.
It's actually a matter of conscience,
Yeah.
personal conscience.
Yeah.
If you don't have conscience, if you accuse me of stealing an airport, I mean, how does that sit with my children? That their father is a thief. Yeah.
No.
And is still continuing to be in that docket.
But Dismas, the hope that we have in the Gen Zs and this emergent wokeness or consciousness should be sustained with integrity. Okay. The problem that I see in some of these guys who've come up with active citizenship going around is that they're debasing the conversation. They're debasing the gist of what they're doing by bringing in non-issues. Let me tell you, even this guy that we are celebrating, Kiraro Kebasor, the one who goes around and guys are contributing. You see, if you're getting into public accountability space to hold political power accountable, focus on that. And, resist any attempt to make all issues about you. Just focus on the issues. The issue of, the president called me, those are digressions. They are non-issues. They are belittling the conversation, and they're making it look like it's about him. It's not about him. Any other person can do that. The fact that he has, pushed himself to do that does not mean that now he becomes the hero. He will only become celebrated by Kenyans if he focuses on issues and we see an end that, is in the interest or a greater interest for a greater majority. But this dovetailing of getting into spaces where he's confronting people, they're getting into, insults here and there. The institution of the presidency is as important as it were. So focus on issues about the presidency. It does not mean that you belittle that institution. And I think if we are excited about the exuberance of the young people, it is also incumbent upon us to also shape the conversation. And where they go wrong,
what you say very importantly also is that about misinformation is that much as we want to hold, I think also we have a responsibility as citizenry that whatever information, whatever complaint, whatever information you bring forth, let it be correct information. Let it be truth. Don't because you're holding someone into account, you should also accept to be held into account.
Yeah, like for instance, some people were engaged in that activism.
Yes.
They did not know when HELB was established.
Yes.
And they don't know that HELB is a successor to many acts.
Yes.
So they believe that people went to university before HELB went for free. They are not paying loans. Yeah. But now that takes us to another interesting conversation around Katiba 14. There were some institutions which were created by Katiba 14, and one wonders whether they're fit for purpose. So we'll go back to the EACC. EACC says that they've got challenges. But would you say they're fit for purpose? A second aspect is budgeted corruption. members of the National Assembly have gone to the top of Mount Kenya and admitted that with 10,000 bob in a khaki envelope, they can actually budget for corruption. 10,000 bob, they can budget for corruption. And then there's the little matter of, it's called CDF, National Government CDF. And understand this entire body has been declared illegal, unconstitutional, all those legal terminologies from the Supreme Court, but we still have it. So where does this leave Mora with our elected representatives? And we had a conversation with Owilla here asking ourselves, these people who run for elective positions and they win, should we refer to them as elected leaders or elected representatives? I've loaded you with so many questions because you are a young Gen Z lawyer.
I'll start with the EACC. There's a time I was doing a podcast and I did a lot of research on the EACC, DCI, and the ODPP. And one thing that I found when I was doing my research is there are so many overlaps in terms of roles, functions, powers, and whatnot. But ultimately, there was mischief when the architects of that particular organization body came up with it, and they made it deliberately toothless, so that we'd always.
That is EACC.
Yeah, the Commission on the Anti-Corruption, so that we'd always find ourselves going in circles and circles and circles, because ultimately, more often than not, the suspects would be politicians. So, is it fit for purpose? Not quite. Should it be done away with? No. What do? I think if there was room for amendments, perhaps a referendum, because I think for a commission, you can only amend through a referendum, is just strengthen the EACC in terms of powers, give it teeth, give it prosecutorial and arresting, apprehensive powers. So that
is that not supposed to be domiciled in one body, arresting and prosecution?
Not really. Wherever we are right now, the EACC only does investigations. You have the ODPP that's supposed to prosecute, but they also want to do their own investigations. And then you have the DCI that's supposed to arrest. They also want to arrest and do their own investigations. So you have a circus of sorts. And ultimately, what would be a good case that would end up in conviction ends up being diluted. There's a lot of interference, and we end up losing out. So if it was possible to just put all of that under one particular body, the EACC, give it powers to ensure that they're able to investigate, apprehend, prosecute, all the way to a conviction, that would help. That would really, really help. And that takes away from other bodies, the ODPP, the DCI, because that is where the interference comes in and the political bad manners that my brother was talking about.
But before you go ahead, there are some people, critics, who say that all matters which go to EACC, they're prosecuted in such a manner to have only one outcome, an acquittal.
Mm-hmm.
And the people blamed...
These other bodies.
No, the two of you, lawyers.
Oh, and then
But I understand what Wakil is saying. It is because it's easy to have that pathway simply because there are so many people involved that you cannot pin one institution and say you're the one who dropped the ball. Yes. So there is EACC here, there is ODPP, there is DCI, and you're thinking, so who has the ultimate responsibility to ensure that this thing goes up to the end? Yeah. Sometimes you hear EACC say that we had watertight evidence. Then the ODPP says that there was nothing there.
There's nothing to write on.
Exactly.
No, but I think that it's important to separate the two institutions, the investigation and prosecution. Because you see now, when you investigate, you're very subjective. So you get someone who's an independent eye to review it, but professionally. So the only thing I agree with my sister is that the DCI doing overlapping job with EACC should be something that should be differentiated completely. Any corruption, leadership, integrity, public funds should be domiciled in one institution like EACC, and then make it a constitutional office, because now it's established under an act of parliament. But maybe we should now make it an independent constitutional office like ODPP with a proper budget, so that they can do their own investigation with powers of apprehension, as I said, well-resourced, and then now they can do that work. Yeah. And then also, of course, you can't rule also corruption in the whole processes. Comes back to the same thing, corruption. Some of the charges are maybe trumped up, some of the charges are politically motivated, some of the charges are not investigated because there is an interest. Then it comes to ODPP, there is an interference. And then it comes to judiciary, bigger problem.
What is the bigger problem?
Corruption.
You know, that, again, there's some people who say that these people, the architects of corruption, when they're taken before a chief magistrate, he'll come, the suspects, most of the time are men, they'll come with a battery of lawyers. Is it actually the case that a magistrate can be intimidated by, say, 5, 10, 20 lawyers?
It cannot be. They are trained not to be. They are independent officers. Should be able to apply their mind to what is before them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this thing we are told that these guys will come with 50 lawyers and intimidate the magistrate is Jabba, it's voodoo.
It's voodoo. Because they just need to, the Chief Justice need to work very hard, and also the Judicial Service Commission need to work very hard, because the bulk of the work that is being done in our judiciary is done by the magistrates. And their terms of conditions and services is, compared them to the ones by the judges, it is, they're 2 worlds apart. So you see, it becomes easy. If a magistrate is earning maybe 200,000 or 300,000 shillings per month, and he's handling a corruption case of $1 billion plus, that is overwhelming in terms of, your financial security vis-a-vis the case that you're handling. So those people will not be properly motivated. Or even if they are, they can easily be swayed. They are humans. So I think they should be properly remunerated, taken care of, and they should be, because they do the bulk of the work. I know some of them are my friends. They work extremely hard in a very difficult circumstances, and they think they have neglected a lot of people. And if you neglect judicial officers, not all of them are Caesar's wives. They will be tempted. And that's now you open an avenue for corruption. So I think the Chief Justice has a lot of work to do, because judiciary is also being blamed as the weakest link in corruption cases. It is a conveyor belt of acquittals in corruption cases.
Yeah, as we wrap up, it's useful to note that President Ruto is probably the first president in Kenya to have presidential tunnels for people to ask him questions directly, and also to be on X.
Is that an achievement?
No,
I don't think there's any other president who has engaged the
it
citizens.
is.
But the question is, President Ruto is the first president to have put himself in a situation where he has to calm down and respond to very, very trivial issues, because he put himself in that space. You can't.
I will not defend him on that.
Yeah, there's 2 ways of looking at it. It's a good thing he has brought himself to a space where accountability is a lot more
But I think at least
it's a good thing.
Presidency.
It's a big thing, but it's not something that we need to celebrate as an achievement first.
But we need him to implement what he has been told.
Yes.
Yes.
If he was implementing, he needed not to have come to this small place.
So as we wrap up, we posed a question to these 2 lawyers that are with a lot of interest, they've carefully avoided, that we've got a constitution which is sacred. But is this constitution a threat to public accountability? Is it a threat to Mura's interest? Is this a threat to politics? The 2010 constitution.
What do you mean by a threat?
Does it serve Mura's
Does it
interest?
work in the
Does it work for Mura?
of Mura?
That's
what you're asking?
Yes.
So you do say that I need to frame it again. Are you saying that this constitution, the question is, does this constitution serve Kenyans?
You framed it very well.
Yes. Like a lawyer. Okay.
Yeah, like a lawyer.
Let me answer my question.
You get the chance to ask your question and answer.
I think this constitution is one of the most progressive we've had. It has opened so much for our country. It's transformative. We have a huge fantastic Bill of Rights. We have independent institutions. And you see, the only thing that we have is it has to be implemented to the letter. So the constitution is not a threat to anyone, in my view. I think it's one of the best constitutions we've had. There have been 3 attempts to amend it, which they have not gone through. There was Okoa Kenya, then there was Okuru Okot who did Punguza Msiko, then there was BBI, then there's also guys who are trying to do it again. Yes, there's nothing wrong with amending the constitution, but give us why is it to amend? Because there are some things which have not been achieved. For example, the 2/3 gender rule has been a monster in the room. In fact, President of the Supreme Court and CJ Maraga wrote to Uhuru that he needs to dissolve parliament because it did not meet the 2/3 gender rule. So,
but that advisory lapse with the tenure of President Kenyatta and Parliament.
Arguments either way, but I think it's still the decision of the court. But you see, it's only that it applied to that parliament. But has this parliament met the same threshold?
Nope.
It has not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it would apply.
Who takes liability? Is it Mora, the voter, who did not elect sufficient females or males for 2/3, or the president?
It is it's a huge thing because you see, I think it was not well thought out provision, if you asked me. During the constitution making process, I'm sorry to her, is that the women had a very strong lobby. And that's why they said we must have, and it's very difficult now to force people to elect, but without saying, okay, how do we for example, county assemblies have achieved it by what they call proportional representation. But National Assembly and Senate were meshindwa.
Actually, a number of MPs complained that when this issue comes to the floor,
huge debate.
Female leaders,
Yes.
female representatives. Now I'm running away from leaders, saying that female elected representatives, they do a runner. They're not in the house to.
So it is a conversation that they need to have to see how best can we achieve that, because we need also our women to be mainstreamed into the public leadership and representation for that matter. So I think that is the biggest failure that we've had as a country, and then also, of course, back to the same thing of corruption. Yeah.
How does corruption affect 2/3?
No. I'm saying the constitution has not been able. The constitution has not been able to deal with the issue of corruption. That's why I'm just saying our bad manners cannot be even cured by an amendment of our constitution.
I think ultimately we just, but first of all, the constitution does not work against us. It has come to cure so many things and ensure inclusivity of all Kenyans of all walks of life, number one. Number two, I think the only issue would be political bad manners, because even the corruption that we keep talking about and the hemorrhaging of the economy falls squarely within political bad manners in this country. And what we need to cure is just that. And we do have hope, especially with the youth of this country. They've made it categorically clear that, this is the route we're taking moving forward. So that's an interesting space to watch. I'm hoping that we can do better by that. But as far as Katiba is concerned, tuko sawa.
And devolution also.
Yeah, before
devolution is a problem because you see there's been a lot of problem, whether it's sustainable, the number of counties we have, and then also the issue of representation, whether we are overrepresented. It is an issue which has become an issue that we may need to revisit. See, now counties now don't have money, have not paid salaries for eons. Do we need 47 counties, or we need to collapse some of them maybe to make it 8?
Before we give
so that is those are the issues we need to grapple as we celebrate the anniversary of this constitution.
Yeah, before Willa gives final remarks and closes the show, I've received a message from a member of the audience asking, the two lawyers are talking about political bad manners. What is this political bad manners? Can you break it down for them to understand?
Since it came from me, yes, political bad manners is just, in Swahili, political bad manners means that you don't have principles, you don't adhere to the constitution, you don't have values within your party, you don't have, you're just a rogue person, a rogue politician. Those are the things that I cannot make you, when I pass as many laws as possible, if you like putting your hand in a cookie jar, you will continue putting it there. Even if you are arrested, you will go back there.
So you're suggesting there are a number of people with responsibility are clever thieves?
They are not clever thieves. They are just thieves with power.
Okay.
I think I'd say political bad manners is just a disregard of common decency, common sense, and basic moral principles that we all hold. You're not supposed to steal. You steal. That's political bad manners and a disregard of common sense. You know very well you're not supposed to drive on the wrong side of the road, but because you think you're a state officer, you can wake up late, turn on the siren, and use the wrong side. That is political bad manners.
Or you are in ODM and then you find yourself in government.
Bro, yes.
You steal for yourself, and when you are caught, you say that my community is being targeted. Political bad manners. Yes.
Musa, would you like to declare your interest on this accumulated ODM matter where Mr. Raila Odinga has released top talent to serve in this administration? You seem to be having fundamental and philosophical issues with that move.
Well, I think our members, our representatives actually is a microcosm which we look at the citizens because they represent the same views. Those leaders in parliament, I think it is we deserve them. It's a representation of all of us.
Yeah.
So that if they are clever thieves,
Then all of
you know,
us.
in the old Chinese society, they used to train thieves. And when you attain a certain rank, you are released to go and steal.
That's
But-
the best we have produced as a country.
but if
We
you
voted-
are
how
caught-
come our whole constituents have voted this person? That is the best we can give.
No, let me clear on the stereo. Let me clear on these clever thieves. But if you're caught stealing, then you're killed. There's a squad and they kill you. So are you suggesting that a number of our elected representatives are on that path?
But we are not in China. We're not in Japan.
And that is ancient China.
Yes.
Modern day China.
Yeah, thanks for that clarity.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of the show, thank you for being with us. Thank you for your messages. I can see we have messages from a number of viewers who've enjoyed the show. Amina is saying that a very interesting show to watch. Always look forward to Sunday to watch this show. Milka is saying, I think it is the other way around. In Ruto's government, those who didn't vote for him have benefited more than those who gave their last vote to put him to presidency. I can't agree more, because that is the perception that is outside there, especially given the goodies that the president distributed in the Luo Nyanza region. But it's a wake-up call. It basically tells Kenyans that it doesn't matter who you elect as your leader, you deserve the right to equitable distribution and allocation of resources. And probably with the woke Gen Zs and the accountability that we see on the digital platform, maybe this will be the beginning of asking questions, asking why this went to this region and why it is not happening to these other regions. And if it is just a promise and hot air, this is another opportunity to ask the president questions going forward. If these things are not delivered, we have an opportunity to ask, why promise, why did you allocate, and why were they not given? But it does portend a very good future for us as Kenyans. We've seen the politicians have come together in what they call the broad-based government. What we are looking at, whose interests are they serving? If they're not serving our interest, we have a lot of questions to ask them. And if they don't serve our interest a few years down the lane, whatever happened that called for this broad-based government is likely to be bigger than what we saw. Until next week, see you and enjoy the rest of your evening.